Picture this for a moment. Think about a man living quietly in a tiny town in Vermont. His name was Ronald Reed. Throughout his entire life, Ronald worked what were basically two modest jobs. He cleaned buildings as a janitor and worked shifts at a local gas station. He wore old, faded flannel shirts almost every day. He drove an aging, rusty-used Toyota that looked like it had seen better decades. To everyone around town, Ronald appeared to be just another humble, hardworking man, barely getting by in life, right? But then something unbelievable happened in 2014. Ronald passed away at 92 years old, and after his death, people discovered he had left behind a fortune worth nearly $8 million. Yes, really, $8 million. The entire community was shocked beyond belief. Absolutely nobody expected it. He never won a lottery jackpot. He never inherited a massive family fortune from some wealthy relative either. So what was his secret? Well, Ronald followed one very specific financial strategy, a nearly forgotten habit that his father taught him during the Great Depression years. And the most incredible part is this. It is a strategy that almost anybody with an ordinary checking account could begin using tomorrow morning. That is exactly what this explainer is all about today. Welcome in. All right, let's get into it. What we are talking about today is something I call the forgotten blueprint for building wealth. Now, before we continue, let me make one thing completely clear. These are not complicated billionaire formulas or mysterious Wall Street systems hidden from ordinary people. Not at all. These are practical, timeless financial habits. Honestly, they are the kind of money lessons your grandparents probably talked about at the kitchen table while drinking coffee together. But here is the really interesting part. Over the last several decades, modern financial institutions, giant banks, huge retailers, and credit card companies have spent billions creating a consumer culture specifically designed to make people forget these exact principles. Why would they do that? Because when you follow these habits, you keep more money for yourself. When you ignore them, those corporations make money from you instead. It really is that straightforward. So today, we are going to walk through several fascinating wealth-building strategies that quietly helped ordinary Americans become financially secure long before the modern financial system took over. To make this easy to understand, we are going to organize everything into 4 separate pillars. First, we will cover Pillar 1, making money feel real again. Then we move into Pillar 2, developing the builder mentality. After that comes Pillar 3, quiet wealth accumulation. Finally, we will finish with Pillar 4, the true financial endgame. So let's begin with Pillar 1, making money feel physical again. Early Americans often succeeded financially because money felt tangible to them. It was something real they could hold and physically experience, a connection modern digital banking has almost completely removed. Think about the old envelope budgeting method. Your grandmother might sit at the kitchen table with actual cash and separate it into envelopes labeled groceries, rent, utilities, and savings. The rule was absolute. If the grocery envelope became empty by Thursday night, then no more grocery shopping happened. You simply cooked whatever food remained in the pantry. Every dollar leaving your hand felt emotionally real. In 1955, families using systems like this, while earning around $4,400 annually, managed to save nearly 8% of their income. Compare that to the modern credit card system most people use now. Credit card companies understand perfectly well that tapping a plastic card or pressing a phone screen creates almost no emotional resistance. There is no physical feeling attached to spending. You are not literally watching your weekly dinner budget disappear from your hand. As a result, people overspend constantly without even realizing it emotionally. That same physical relationship with money also shaped how older generations bought expensive items they could not immediately afford. This brings us to the brilliant idea of layaway. Younger viewers may barely recognize the concept, but it worked beautifully. You selected an item at a store. The store placed it aside with your name attached, and you slowly paid small amounts of cash over several weeks until the balance reached zero. Only after fully paying for it could you bring the item home. Notice what did not exist in this system. No interest payments, no dangerous debt, no financial trap hanging over your head. And maybe most importantly, there was a built-in waiting period that almost completely eliminated impulse purchases. Think about that. If halfway through paying for a jacket or toaster you changed your mind, you simply requested your money back and walked away. The item returned to the shelf and life moved on. By 1965, layaway represented more than 30% of all department store sales. But during the 1970s, retailers intentionally eliminated it. Why? Because credit cards arrived. Retailers realized they could offer instant gratification while charging customers 18% interest. Layaway disappeared because it benefited buyers too much and forced patience. Retailers did not want consumers developing. Keeping money physical also gave people enormous negotiating power. Think carefully about this figure, between 12 and 15%. A study from 1959 discovered that Americans making major purchases with physical cash saved around 12 to 15% compared to buyers using installment plans. Your grandfather probably refused to pay full price for almost anything. Not for a car, not for a washing machine, probably not even for a used lawnmower. If you entered a furniture store in 1960 holding $200 in real cash and offered $160 immediately, the salesman usually accepted the deal. Why? Because immediate guaranteed money beat uncertain future payments every time. Cash created urgency, and urgency created discounts. We stopped negotiating largely because fixed pricing and credit cards made bargaining feel socially uncomfortable. But here is the truth. The power of holding physical cash still works today if you are confident enough to use it. That naturally leads us into Pillar 2, the builder mindset. Modern culture trains people to become passive consumers. When something breaks, most people replace it or hire somebody else to fix it. Previous generations thought completely differently. They saw themselves as producers instead. Just look at the simple economics of owning tools. In 1948, a Sears Craftsman wrench set cost about one full day's wages, roughly $12.95. But that single wrench set could save more than $200 annually in plumbing and mechanic bills. Your grandfather never called a repairman for a leaking faucet. He reached for his tools and handled it himself. The philosophy behind this was brilliant. Every tool you own permanently replaces a professional service you would otherwise continue paying for forever. A $3 caulking gun prevented expensive winter damage. A $9 soldering iron allowed someone to repair a broken radio instead of throwing it away. Today, Americans spend more than $500 billion every year on simple household services that basic tools and free online tutorials could easily eliminate. Your grandfather's toolbox was not a hobby. It was essentially a high-return investment portfolio built from steel. This producer mentality also shaped how older generations handled food. They did not think in terms of paychecks every 2 weeks like modern families often do. They thought seasonally. During World War II, Victory Gardens produced roughly 40% of all vegetables consumed throughout the United States. But even after the war ended, families continued planting gardens because the financial advantages were enormous. In 1946, a 5-cent packet of tomato seeds produced enough food to replace nearly $30 worth of store tomatoes. A small quarter-acre garden could save the equivalent of 2 weeks of grocery expenses every growing season. And gardening was only part of the strategy. Families bought food in massive quantities during harvest season. They purchased 40 pounds of green beans when prices dropped to 4 cents per pound, then canned them for winter storage. They bought quarter cows directly from ranchers, wrapped and froze the meat themselves, and paid far less than grocery store prices. Even today, buying a quarter cow usually costs about $5 to $7 per pound across every cut, including premium steaks that supermarkets sell for $15 or $20 per pound. The principle was simple: think ahead, spend once, and feed your family for months. Beyond food, the maker economy of the 1950s became a powerful system for preserving wealth. Families commonly avoided 60 to 80% of retail costs by bypassing stores completely. A dress purchased in a store during 1955 might cost $8.95, but sewing the same dress from raw fabric cost only $1.50. A wooden bookshelf sold for $22 at a department store, while the lumber required to build it cost about $4. Families also treated labor like currency through barter systems. The local mechanic repaired the dentist's vehicle, while the dentist handled the mechanic's dental work. No money changed hands, meaning the banking system and taxes were largely avoided. On top of that, they repaired and resold nearly everything. Someone could buy a broken radio at a yard sale for 50 cents, replace a vacuum tube for a nickel, then resell it for $8 at a flea market. Broken items were not considered trash. They were simply deeply discounted opportunities. Now let's continue into Pillar 3, quiet accumulation. Everything we discussed so far focused mainly on keeping more money inside the household. Now let's examine how older generations multiplied that money over time. People today love believing they invented side hustles and gig work. Not even remotely true. In 1962, nearly 1 out of every 4 American men earned income from a second source. Many operated small mail-order businesses directly from their kitchen tables after dinner. Spending $75 on a classified magazine advertisement in 1955 could easily generate $50 every month in recurring passive orders. Families also turned their homes into income-producing assets whenever possible by renting spare rooms. In 1950, nearly 10% of American households rented an extra bedroom. Charging between $8 and $15 weekly often covered an entire monthly mortgage payment for the homeowner. The math is basically identical to modern Airbnb hosts earning roughly $14,000 yearly today. Then there was another strategy that many people now consider controversial: buying small whole-life insurance policies for children shortly after birth. In 1950, a $5,000 policy cost only about $3 per month. By the time the child reached 40 years old, the policy functioned as a guaranteed private savings vehicle with cash value available through low-interest borrowing, completely outside traditional banking systems. Now we need to discuss one of the largest modern wealth traps ever created: the automobile. Car companies spend billions convincing consumers that buying brand new vehicles reflects personal identity and success. Your grandparents viewed cars strategically instead of emotionally. In 1957, the average new vehicle cost $2,749. Meanwhile, the average used car cost about $1,200. A new car instantly lost 25% of its value the moment it left the dealership. That means a quarter of the buyer's money disappeared immediately. By consistently purchasing used vehicles instead, families saved around $1,500 every purchase. Then, they drove those cars until they practically stopped functioning. The money saved went into property, investments, or savings accounts. Over an entire lifetime, repeatedly choosing reliable used vehicles instead of new ones often saved enough money to equal purchasing another house altogether. Which brings us back to Ronald Reed from Vermont. How exactly did a janitor earning modest wages quietly accumulate $8 million? He relied on something called a DRIP, short for Dividend Reinvestment Plan. Beginning during the 1960s, major companies like AT&T, General Electric, and Procter & Gamble allowed ordinary investors to buy stock directly without expensive Wall Street brokers involved. Even better, they allowed investors to automatically reinvest quarterly dividend payments into additional shares. Somebody could start with one $30 share. Every quarter, that stock produced a small dividend payment. The dividend automatically purchased additional fractional shares. Those new shares then produced their own dividends. The cycle continued compounding for decades. A simple $500 investment in Procter & Gamble during 1960, with dividends continually reinvested, would now exceed $600,000 in value. No advanced stock expertise required, no market timing required, only patience. That exact long-term strategy is how Ronald Read quietly built wealth for 60 years straight. Housing also played a major role in wealth accumulation. Long before social media invented trendy phrases like house hacking, young couples during the 1940s and 1950s routinely bought duplexes using accessible FHA loans. The strategy was brilliant. They lived in one side of the duplex while renting the other side to tenants. Rental income frequently covered most or even all mortgage costs. The family effectively lived for free while the tenant slowly paid down their debt and increased their equity. Many families repeated the process multiple times, building small portfolios of rental properties generating reliable passive retirement income. They did not rely entirely on pensions or retirement accounts. The properties themselves produced the income. Older generations also fully utilized systems many modern Americans barely know still exist. One perfect example involves county tax auctions. Since the 1800s, counties have seized properties from owners failing to pay property taxes. Those properties are then sold publicly to recover the unpaid debt. Smart Americans during the mid-century era attended these auctions regularly. A vacant lot worth $5,000 or even a small house with only $300 in unpaid taxes might sell for little more than the taxes owed. Buyers acquired land for pennies on the dollar and simply held it while nearby areas developed. Entire real estate fortunes were quietly built this way. Amazingly, these exact systems still exist today in every state across America. The listings are public, and bidding often starts at only the unpaid taxes. Most people simply never attend because nobody told them these opportunities existed. Which finally brings us into Pillar 4, the ultimate financial endgame. What was the true purpose behind all these habits, from envelope budgeting to used cars and victory gardens? The goal was complete financial independence and lasting freedom. The entire philosophy can be summarized like this. Visible wealth and real wealth were never the same thing. Here is what that means. During the 1950s, families earning $5,000 yearly intentionally lived as though they earned only $4,000. That remaining $1,000 immediately flowed into savings, property, or investments before bills were even paid. Living below their means was intentional. They willingly wore winter coats another year. They cooked meals at home most nights without complaint. Meanwhile, the flashy neighbor driving a brand new Cadillac probably carried enormous hidden debt. But the quiet neighbor driving a 6-year-old Ford may have already owned several rental properties outright. The difference between income and spending became the engine creating long-term freedom. In the 1950s, America's personal savings rate climbed above 10%. Today, it sits around 4%, while total household consumer debt exceeds $17 trillion. Older generations also made certain these values survived by actively teaching financial literacy to their children. Honestly, the most powerful wealth-building strategy on this list is not a stock investment or real estate trick at all. It is parenting. Children learned financial discipline through real-world experience. By age 10, many kids delivered newspapers, operated lemonade stands, or shoveled snow for spare change. They learned three critical lessons early. First, earning money required effort. Second, saving money created future opportunities. Third, investing should become automatic. A child who regularly deposited half their paper route earnings into savings naturally became an adult consistently contributing toward retirement without hesitation. It was never about genetics. It was about early conditioning. Teaching children to earn, save, and invest before age 12 creates a lifelong advantage no inheritance can replicate. Finally, we arrive at the ultimate destination every strategy in this explainer pointed toward: owning your home completely debt-free. In 1960, the average American strongly preferred a 15-year mortgage. Families routinely made extra principal payments and sacrificed vacations just to eliminate the debt faster. Why were they so determined? Because the day that mortgage disappeared represented true financial freedom. Families literally invited neighbors over to celebrate burning the mortgage paperwork in the fireplace. Without a mortgage payment, a family required far less income to survive. They could retire earlier, reduce working hours, and survive recessions more comfortably. Today, the standard mortgage stretches 30 years. Why? Because longer loans generate far more interest profits for banks. The 15-year mortgages older generations preferred denied banks decades of additional earnings. Every strategy we covered today was designed to funnel money relentlessly into paying off that home faster, stopping the endless transfer of wealth toward financial institutions and redirecting it back into the family's future instead. And now we reach the final question. Your grandparents and people like Ronald Reed understood how to quietly build stable, lasting wealth using straightforward common sense principles. They physically experienced their money. They produced more than they consumed. They accumulated assets quietly without needing attention or validation. And they prioritized ownership over endless debt. Now their blueprint is sitting directly in front of you. So here's the challenge. Will you choose even one of these forgotten strategies and actually apply it in your own life this week? Or will you simply keep scrolling and forget everything we discussed today? The decision and your financial future belongs entirely to you. Thank you very much for spending time with me during this explainer, and I sincerely challenge you to begin building genuine wealth starting today. See you next time.